In this video, I'm going to show you how to use UI segmented control to switch between different lists of items, and items will be displayed in the TableView controller. In this video, the list of items will be loaded from an array of strings declared inside of the view controller. In my other video, I'll show you how to load these items from a remote PHP script. And we'll have a refresh button which will refresh each of the items list. Okay, so let's begin and create this little example. I have a new project created. It's absolutely empty project, and it has only one view controller. So I'll start using this view controller. And first of all, I will embed this view controller into navigation controller. So I'll go to editor, embed in navigation controller. I'll quickly resize it to iPhone 4-inch, and I'll give it a title. I'll select navigation item and give it a title my lists. Okay, now under the right side panel here under objects library, I will look for segmented control. Here it is, segmented control. I'll drag and drop it into my view controller, and we'll resize it. Now by default, segmented control has two options, first and second, but I can add more items, and on the right side under attributes inspector, I have segments, the drop down list, so I can decrement or increment this number. So I can click on the arrow up to make it 3 items. 3 options. So and then under segment, I can select each of them and rename. So for example, now I have first one selected, and I will change its title to private list, something like this, private. And then I'll select second, and I will choose protected, protected or friends and family, something like this. And I'll select the third one, and I'll give it a title public list. Okay, I have 3 options now, and I will be switching between 3 of this and updating my table view. So now let's go back to objects library and find table view. Here it is. I have table view, and I'll click and drag it here, resize it full width and full height. Okay, so we have table view, and we will need one prototype cell for this table view. So I'll select table view, and under attributes inspector here, content, prototype cells, I will increase it to 1. Okay, and while we are here and working with prototype cells, let's select the cell, and we can actually make sure that the cell is selected by hiding right side panel and then opening up this little document outline button. And under the document outline, we can see which component is selected. So I'll select table cell here and go back to my right side panel, and under identifier, I'll give it an identifier my cell. I will need this identifier when I work with table view rows and when I dequeue each of table view cells. So we need to remember this identifier, my cell. Okay, and next item that we will need to create for our user interface is item button. So under the objects library, I will type item, and I have item bar button item here. I'll click on it, drag and drop it to my right side corner, and under the system item here, I will choose a different one. I'll look for refresh, and the icon will change to a refresh icon. Okay, so our user interface is created, and next let's create some outlets and connectors. Now, because I'm using my default view controller, I've created an empty project, and Xcode created for me a default view controller. It already has custom Swift class associated with it, so I don't need to create a new custom class for it. And what I can do now, I can start creating outlets for the table view first. So I'll select I'll create a couple of connectors for it. So I'll select table view, hold control button, click and drag all the way to this first yellow button and will release. And I will select data source, and I'll do this again for delegate. Okay, now we have outlets for table view created. Sorry, let me hide left side panel so I get more space, and then I'll select this ViewController and open it in Assistant Editor by clicking on these two circles here, and I'll hide right side panel. Now I'll create an outlet for each of these visual controls. So I'll select a UISegmentedControl first and hold control button, click, drag and drop into my Swift code. And for the connection should be outlet, and the name I'll give it my SegmentedControl. Okay, I have an outlet for SegmentedControl and I should be able to work with it. I'll do the same for my table view. So I'll select table view, hold control button, click, drag and drop it here, and I'll give it the name my table view. Okay, and for the refresh button as well, but for the refresh button that will be an action. So I'll select refresh button, hold control button, click, drag and drop it somewhere here. And for the connection type I'll choose action, and I'll give it an action action name refresh button tapped. Okay, so when user taps on this button, this function will be called. Before we complete working with user interface, let's preview this user interface in our preview section. So I will select ViewController, then click on this button here. It says automatic and under Assistant Editor, and I'll choose preview. Now I have a preview of this user interface in iPhone 4-inch device size. So I can click on this button here to see to preview how it is in landscape mode, and I see that my user interface does not support landscape mode. So what I can do quickly here is I can simply select this ViewController and then click on this right side button here, and will under the list of options I will choose reset to suggested constraints. This will instruct Xcode to suggest some constraints for my user interface, and I see that it helped. Now I can rotate it back and try again, and it works. And I can actually tap on this plus button as well to choose a different device. For example, I'll choose iPhone 4 7H, a larger device. Here it is, and I can also preview it in a landscape orientation, and it all looking good. Okay, so I think we're done with the user interface, and now let's proceed and write some Swift code. So I will close this right side panel, and I will actually now open it again as in Assistant Editor, and we'll continue to work with table view first. Okay, for our table view to be able to display data, we will need our ViewController to conform to a couple of protocols. And first of them is called UITableView datasource. So I will type UITableView datasource. And the second one is called UITableView delegate. So I'll type UITableView delegate. Now each of these protocols has some functions that I will need to implement. So if I hold command button on my keyboard and then click on the name, for example of the first one, UITableView datasource, it will take me to protocol, and I'll see the functions that this protocol has that I can implement. Some of them are optional and some of them are required. So optional functions, they have this optional keyword at the beginning, and the two functions that are required to implement are the first two. So I can simply select the table view number of rows and section and the table view cell for index for row at index path, and copy them, go back to my view controller, and maybe right above here, refresh button top, I will paste these two functions, and I will get rid of comments, and then I will add a body for each of these functions, and then I will add return statement. For example, the table view number of rows and section should return an integer. So at this moment I will declare an integer, let it be a variable return value equals 0, and then I will return this return value. Value. Now Xcode is complaining that this function is public, and it most probably wants it to be internal. So internal is a default access modifier for functions. So I can either type internal or I can delete public to make Xcode stop complaining. And what is it complaining now? Okay, so it says the variable return value was not muted, but we will change its value. So let's leave it as is for the moment, and edit our other function. So cell for row at index path, it should return table view cell, and here we will declare a new variable as well. Let it be my cell equals to table view dequeue reusable cell with identifier for index path. This is the one we need. And remember, the identifier we created for our cell, we call it my cell, and index path should be the index path that comes to our function here as a parameter. Okay, and now we need to return this cell. Return my cell. Return my cell. We will work with this cell. We'll come back and work with it again, but at this moment let's leave it as is. Okay, and now for this table view to be able to display some data, we need this data created. And for this example, I will hard code the data in array of lists, and I have prepared a few lines of code to make this video shorter. It's going to be 3 arrays, each containing string values. So for the private section, when user taps on private, I will display values that are stored in an array of that's called private list. When user taps on protected, I will display items from an array that's called friends and family. And when user taps on public, we'll display values from an array of that's called public list. Okay, and let's assume that user selected. No, let's actually implement. Let's go ahead and implement the function for our table for our segmented control. So I'll select segmented control first, and then I will click on control button, and then drag and drop it to my source code and release it here. So that's going to be an action, and event is going to be value changed, and I will give it a name, something like segmented control action changed, something like this. You can give it any name, but I called it this way. So now I know that when user taps on this button, this function is going to be called, and at this moment what I will do, I will simply reference to my table view and I'll reload its data. So reloading data will trigger these two functions to be called in following order. The first function will be number of rows and section, And now this function needs to return how many rows will be there if user clicks or user taps on private button. And the number of rows will depend on the number of items we need to display. So for the private list, we'll need to display 2. So what I can do, I can select this private list and simply return private list count. But I cannot simply return private list count. I'm not sure. I need to know which item is selected. So to identify which button is tapped, I can use a switch statement. So let me comment this for a little while. I can use switch statement, and that will be switch for my segmented control selected segment index. And I will declare a few cases. So for the case 0, meaning for the first option, we will do this code. For the case 1, so if user taps on protected button, we will implement this business logic. And for the case, case 3, 2, we will do this, and default we will simply break as well. So let's go back to our case 1. So if user taps on private, this code will be executed, and inside of this statement, what we can do, we can assign our return value to the private list count. If user taps on protected, we will assign return, let's just copy this, return value account of friends and family. And if user taps on public, we will return account of public list. Return value equals public list count. Public list count. Okay, so this is it for the number of rows in section. Now next, when number of rows in sections returns a value, for example, let's assume user taps on private and the private returns 2, then this function will be called, and cell for row index path will need to return 2 cells because private list has 2 items. And cell will be returned by default, is going to be empty, but we need to assign it a label, something like this. My label, I think it's text label text equals the value that we have in our array list. So here we will reuse the switch statement because we need to know which row is going to be, which button is going to be tapped, so that we know which value to read. So for the case 0, our cell will be assigned a value from array private list index path row. And for the and if user taps on protected, we need to return a value from a list of friends and family. And if user taps on public, we will need to return a value from public list. And this is it. So for the private list, there will be 2 cells, and for each cell, we will return a value from the private list. And for the protected, friends and family, and for the public list. So this should work. And we can already try running this code and see how it works. So let's run and see if it works. I will select iPhone 5 and run it. Here we go. So we have private selected by default, and we have two items stored in array of private list. And if I tap on protected, it goes to protected and it displays 3 items that come from an array of friends and family. And if I tap on public, I get items from the public list. And let me try rotating this device orientation. So I'll select simulator and go to hardware, device, hardware, rotate left, and I get a landscape view. And if I go back, hardware, rotate right, I'm back to portrait view. So everything is working except the refresh button. I don't remember if I created an outlet for it. Yes, I do have an action, but refresh button doesn't do anything. Well, what refresh button needs to do? Refresh button needs to simply refresh the list. And what we can do here, we can reload data of our table view. And again, the reload data will trigger these two functions to be called, number of rows and sections, which will return the count for our list. And then it will trigger self-route index path, which will return number of cells for the selected option, and it all will work just fine. So I'll run it again to see if refresh button is working. Here we go. I click on refresh button. I can't see anything because it refreshes so quickly, because it doesn't need to load data from a server side. All data is loaded from our source code, so it just works. Okay, so this is it for this video, and in my next video I'm going to show you how to load this list of items from a remote PHP script.